Good morning, Carl. Thanks for
Hey,
being with
Jason.
us.
Yeah, how are you? Good to see you.
I'm doing well. It's good to see you too. It's weird that we are doing this while being just across the harbor from each other, but it seems like
Even harbor is
technology
a big
has
term.
wanted this to be the way. Um, but it's great to connect. Very excited to talk more about what you're up to in the world. I know there's quite a bit that you have going on, as well as your background, leading some pretty incredible brands. So I
Jason.
think just, as a starting point, would love to maybe just get a quick intro from you. And I'm going to pull a line from one of the testimonials that I saw on your site, which is, tell us about the man behind the red glasses.
Oh yeah, that was my good friend Scott, colleague. Um, yeah, so thanks for having me. First off, it's great to connect with you. I've really enjoyed getting to know you better here in LA. Um, Bit of an intro. I have worked in technology for about 25 years, most of that time doing branding and marketing. Had a variety of experiences, sort of started my career as a designer and an architect, and discovered the world of branding back in 2003 and have been really immersed in that ever since. I've had the good fortune of working at some really amazing companies, Apple, Microsoft, Adobe, eBay, as well as agency side at Razorfish and Landor, and I started my own agency called Hyatt Sus. My wife and I live here in Playa del Rey and by the beach in LA, and my kids are in DC and in New York City. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Have they followed in your footsteps in the brand world or something
No,
completely
they've
different?
gone off to do more service-oriented work. So, with data and then also with social work. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Sounds good. And kind of curious, just given how you said where you started off being in architecture, what was that initial shift for you? And was there anything that you've still found you've taken over from that early kind of training and part of your career?
Yeah, I actually bring a lot of what I learned then in. Well, so first off, it was a really great career. It's a really wonderful thing to study. I have some good friends that are architects and classmates from, have a master's in architecture from UCLA. And, I think I bring from it a really great ability to think sort of concretely and abstractly together. So to conceptualize, but then also to make, certainly learn how to take criticism and creative feedback, as that was a big part of stuff that happened in our architecture studio reviews. And, ultimately, I think a lot about like customer journeys, and that's not so different from the way an architect thinks. So, like, what is the experience you're trying to create from someone? What is the path? How are you trying to get people from point A to point B? And, what are those moments of delight that you're creating along the way? They say architecture is frozen music, and if
True.
architecture is frozen music, then branding helps orchestrate a lot of the experiences that we have.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, it's an interesting concept, and I guess, yeah, I'd be curious to go almost a level deeper in that. In these conversations, I think really the intent is to get to, yeah, some interesting, nuanced perspectives. I think everybody who's been in brand comes at it from, a slightly different way, but shares a lot of similar experiences, principles. And so I guess, in light of that and, has brand as this orchestrator, yeah, where do you see kind of brand as it exists within the construct of businesses today, rightly or wrongly, I guess, like in, best practices or in maybe less so. How do you see yeah, I guess when you're working with companies, how do you try to implement that brand as kind of the orchestrator of what they do?
Sure. Well, first off, I think a lot of companies think of brand as something um, sort of that you apply. So here's our logo, here's our look and feel, and maybe miss the opportunity to think about brand as the ability for you to really connect everything you do and say and how you say and do it. And so, a lot of the companies I work with, we start by thinking about, what is your purpose? What is your reason for being in the world? How do you create and identify something that differentiates you, which specifically means something that is important to customers and you can own. A lot of companies will differentiate themselves, but perhaps not on something that matters to customers. That was actually a challenge I had when I was leading global brand at eBay, right? Like we were very different, but not necessarily in a way that was hyper relevant to customers. Meaning we were a place for people to find like weird, hard to find items, but most of the world wanted, things in 2 days or less and fast and free shipping and easy returns. And so we were almost too different. And so how do you create differentiation that is both ownable and important? And, in terms of kind of what companies do to work with brands, like there's so much opportunity to really weave in your purpose into the kinds of experiences that you want to create. Airbnb has a great example, right? They were all about belong anywhere and they launched experiences that was, if you really stand for belonging anywhere, then you should be able to connect with locals that can show and guide you around and help you really better experience the places that you're, visiting or living in temporarily.
Yeah. Airbnb is always one that like is very inspiring to me. I think especially when they were first coming out, as somebody who was traveling quite a bit around the world at that time and wanting to connect more deeply to the places that you go. And I remember listening to a podcast with, I think, Brian Chesky, and him talking about like 11-star experiences. Like, what is an 11-star travel experience versus, a traditional 5-star experience? And how do you continue to raise the bar? And I think it's an interesting example of where product and brand have really been intertwined in what they do. I think maybe nowadays, as they scale, it gets a little bit more challenging because it goes from those hosts being locals to those hosts being people making just a business off of short-term rentals. But um, just something that I think every business probably has to goes through in terms of the challenges of what different evolutions look like and how to stay true to their brand and their ethos over time.
Yeah, one of the reasons I joined eBay was because we had moved brand out of the marketing function into
Hmm.
the product organization. So I actually worked for the chief product officer, and we were connecting brand and product because ultimately the experience is the brand, the product is the brand. There's so many things that influence a brand beyond just, the look and feel or even some words that you use. It ultimately is about the experience that you're delivering. And so that was an opportunity to really, you know, put our really focus on creating those kinds of product experiences that would delight, existing and new customers and really help reshape the brand after we had separated from PayPal.
Hmm. Is there anything? Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's super interesting. And I wonder, I guess in your experience, product is, I think a core piece of that because that is fundamental to the experience that your customers have with you. Are there any other stakeholders or leaders in the organization you found it like important, whether that's HR and the internal experience, or, I mean, how do you think about holistically, how brand needs to sit in these organizations and who needs to be involved?
Yeah, it's a really tough one. First off, I believe like a brand organization should be every member of a company.
Yeah.
If you have 30,000 people working at your company, then enlist all 30,000 in being like the best brand ambassadors. But of course, you're not going to make effective decisions with 30,000 people weighing in internally, and then of course the world externally weighing in. And so, there are important teams that are set aside specifically tasked with thinking about the brand and the longevity and future and how to evolve it and grow it. And that's a luxury. And, one of the things that happens in many organizations is oftentimes it's just people have different incentives or goals and metrics. And so the people in an organization that are thinking about brand oftentimes think about the whole portfolio, not just one part of the business. But many of the colleagues that you might work with that may be critical of brand decisions might be looking at it solely through the lens of the specific product, that they're charged with. And so one of the really cool things about brand is that you can look holistically at every aspect of the business and see the impact that that may have on, so that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts,
Hmm.
right? And so there's no right way to do it. It depends so much on the history of a company and the leadership of the company. Is this a founder-led company, or is this a company that's going through, a rebirth, or is this a company that has literally just started 2 weeks ago? And, there's so many variables. And so I really like to create things that are unique to the clients I work with. And there's certainly best practices to leverage. A couple of things that I was able to do is really revisit some of the hallmark traditional elements of brand building and kind of reinvent them for the future. So historically, like, you have strategy and you define a strategy, and then you go into the creative, and the creative expresses that strategy, right? And then you go into your campaigns and your other things that companies create and do to deliver on the creative work that's been generated. And I look at that quite differently. I work much more in like sprints and agile methodologies rather than a linear waterfall approach. And so I love thinking and making at the same time and testing hypotheses instead of sort of saying, this is the answer, say, this is a hypothesis for what we believe is a really strong direction. By the way, we have two other scenarios that we've envisioned as well that could be really powerful for the company. Now let's bring those to life and have a discussion around the potential and the opportunity of these scenarios. And that means thinking about your positioning and your strategy, but also your tone and your creative expression as like a specific module, if you will, and replicating that a few times so that when you're, in my experience, companies make decisions on strategy and then they see creative and sometimes they get confused. They're like, what's that? And you're like, well, that's the expression of the strategy we agreed to. And people are like, no, no, that's not what I envisioned. And so when you bring creative and strategy together in these agile sprints, you can actually tell people here's the strategy and here's the implications of that strategy. And so you're better able to make more informed decisions, but then also move quicker because now you've aligned not only on the strategy, but maybe the tone and the sort of the creative approach and the territory. And so you're often running, into campaign and content creation because you have artifacts to look at. And a great example of that, Jason, is like if I said to you, we this brand needs to be genuine or authentic. And you're like, okay, well, I'm often running creatively thinking what I think is genuine or authentic, but that could mean a ton of different things to different people. And so connecting those dots is again not the typical way that um, the traditional roles follow each other, but has enabled me and the companies I've worked with and the teams I've had the good fortune of leading to do really creative, powerful work much more quickly that has much more impact because now everyone's aligned on a common strategy and a common creative vision for what needs to happen.
Interesting. Yeah, I think, yeah, all too many times you're caught up in these different stages when you do them sequentially. And then also, I think when sometimes creative also helps you really understand strategy and what the potential is of it further because it connects, again, it's a little bit more, yeah, on the nose or
Well,
connects with people as opposed to just what, again, strategy could be interpreted in different ways. And it's hard to really see how that might come to life.
the best creatives I know are highly strategic, and the
Yeah.
best strategists oftentimes are highly creative. But sometimes they're creative outside of work. They're like, oh, yeah, at work I just do this strategy job, but when I'm home, I'm a creator or a potter or a painter or a musician, and we miss so much opportunity by putting people in these narrow boxes. And one of the cool things about digital is, and maybe even with the rise of AI, is it's like changing everything and changing the landscape. And someone's like, oh, that person is an accountant, but they're also like a TikTok celebrity on like accounting talk or whatever that might be. And so now they're creators, and I think that's awesome because you can, you know, ultimately better connect with your customers if you're thinking about your customers as multifaceted, and if you're thinking about your teams as multifaceted. And how cool, again, obviously there's organizations and teams and structures, and people should respect what people were hired to do within a role. But everyone always wants this like out of the box thinking. But then you follow very traditional and narrow roles and rules and job descriptions, and how are you expected to get this like highly original creative work out of that? I like to, talk a little bit about the fact that like today if you apply for a job, you some people use AI now, right, to like write your resume or review your resume. And then you send that resume in and it gets reviewed by and scanned by AI. And so now you have like AI talking to AI, and then if you're lucky to get, an interview, maybe you've used AI to like kind of play out some scenarios to questions you might get asked or answered. We miss the opportunity for like these outliers, and it's these unexpected people. It's the people that I have bet on through my career, or that people have bet on me when I wasn't like the most obvious fit for something, that creates the unexpected. And that's what potentially can result in like outside of the box thinking. If you want outside of the box thinking, don't keep everyone in the box.
You would think, yeah, it sounds so obvious when you say it like that.
Well, yeah, and it's hard now. It's hard to break through. It's hard to connect. If you're job hunting, there's so many people right now looking for work, and it's really hard to get through these systems. And so you have to look outside of those boundaries and outside of those systems. And that's where maybe like content creators have an advantage in trying to get jobs because they're doing original things and applying for jobs differently. And sometimes these things go viral of like the person who did a really beautiful or courageous or weird thing as part of their job application, and that's what got them noticed. And so brands also think like that. What are the weird or courageous or interesting things I need to do to get people's attention? Because we're surrounded by, it used to be 7 to 10,000 touch points a day, that people were hit with. And now you got to wonder if that's increased with the amount of time we're on screens and the number of things that we're multitasking, and we're on mobile while we're on video. And so brands are also clamoring for attention. And so you have to come back to like, again, why you exist as a company, or if you're an employee, why you want to work at that company, and have really good answers so that you can then guide and orchestrate everything towards that goal.
Hmm. You just got me thinking in a number of different ways, but um, just about you were talking about like attention. I mean, I think the whole thing with AI is fascinating, but also can be so challenging for that reason. It's like everything is becoming automated in this really algorithmic driven detail. And yeah, so how do you stand out? How are you different? The amount of content coming out being immensely more, um, and making that originality all the more important to cut through, while also knowing you're just going to be competing with them, just volumes and volumes of content. I think on the other side, there was, I mean, I mean, just a trigger in my mind. And I remember at one of the Brandon Sand events, I met with one of your friends who is running a new type of social media company. And we had a lot of conversations. There was somebody who was there, the head of brand for Instagram or previously. I was like wondering, I wonder if there's like a Patagonia for social media where you could be like, turn off your phones. Like, is there something there that given all of the how the world is evolving, how content is evolving, how unoriginal, not unoriginal, but AI generated content is evolving, like what is the counterbalance or force to this, or how do brands need to adapt to these new realities?
Well, there was a lot there that you just touched on, and let me also, by the way, just start and explain what brand and sand is. It's something a brand community that I was able to launch about 4 months ago, and got Adobe to sponsor it as well. And LA is a bit of a transactional town, and people want something from you, or people you want something from others, and that was a little bit of the vibe that I experienced here versus my time in the Bay Area, where I found people were really like open and gracious and generous with the kinds of introductions to people that would spark really exciting conversations and maybe new opportunities. And so I wanted to bring some of that here to LA. And so I launched Brand and Sand. It's a monthly meetup by the beach to talk about brand and bring people together. And so that was exciting. I'm glad you've been a part of that, and we've gotten to connect and have really, really rich discussions. You were touching on sort of AI and in many aspects of it. I thought I'd share a couple of quick thoughts that I have,
Yeah.
which is like I'm not sure people are thinking of AI in the right way. Like most people seem to think of AI almost the way people use like an electric walkway to get somewhere faster instead of maybe thinking of AI like a bridge to connect you to like a new future and a new reality and to get to know each other better and to go from the past to the future. And there's so much, of course, AI can help us be more efficient and productive, and that matters. People are always looking for faster, cheaper ways to do things, but the real power, I think, of AI is going to be in the experiences that are created, in the personalized experiences that are created. It's why we gravitated to Spotify many years ago, and why people are so excited to share their, wrapped at the end of the year, because it's like, oh, look how well the personalization works. Like it really knows all these aspects of me, and maybe I even discover aspects of me I didn't even realize. Like I have something in common with these, other groups of people that also seem to like this genre of music that's like very specific. And so I think that's where AI really shines, is in creating personalized experiences. But many of us just are kind of using it, or many clients out there that I see are sort of trying to rely on it to just get things done faster, or maybe justify a um, a reduction in their workforce. Oh, we don't need as many people now. We have redundancies. The truth is, I think with AI, we're going to need many people too. They're just going to have different skill sets. If you've been in technology long enough, you've seen waves of innovation come through, and there's always the promise of like, oh, we're going to do so much more with so much less. The reality is um, that may exist in certain pockets, but ultimately there's more to do, and there's more variety. Like 20 years, 30 years ago, you had specific channels to build your brand. It's why brands cared so much about color initially, and why like Microsoft, Google, and several other companies all had kind of the same primary colors, because like you were gonna like print something or put it up on this digital channel that was gonna stay there for a long time. Now there's new channels invented every day, and your brand has to be cohesive, not consistent. And so you really have to start to think about how do you create that common thread across your brand. That's where I think the purpose plays a big role. We're in a really, really messy era, but the promise of AI, I think, is going to be to create all sorts of new, incredible experiences that really delight us if we use it wisely, or scare the hell out of us if we, you know, don't apply the right ethics and standards and um, solutions that need to be put in place to use it in a responsible way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is the big debate, I guess, and unknown today. But I do agree. It's all about, yeah, how do you harness and leverage this technology for the
For
best outcome for
Well, for
people?
personalized experiences, like there's
Mhm.
so many cool things you can do. Like, why is it that like you have all these frequent flyer miles, but like there's nothing prompting you to say like, "Hey, Jason, with those miles, you should go here, here, and here because we actually know you and care about you and like we've learned from some of your habits of like travel and preferences and where you like to dine and where you're going on Google Maps. Again, if you offer the permissions and if
Yeah.
that feels right from you for you from a privacy perspective, there's a whole travel interface layer that airlines can own or somebody can own that isn't there. And, we instead we're thinking about like, oh, now you can't talk to a call center customer, service representative when you miss your flight. That's what's happening with AI. It's like, oh, now you can just launch your app and you find out that you've been put on another airline at a different time on a different day, which isn't what you really wanted instead of envisioning like the power and future of what travel experiences could be like for you. And oh, we served you up a really cool offer that was tailored just to you because we know that, these are the kinds of things that you look for. And so customer service, I think, is almost getting worse now with AI. And and that's what we're using it for instead of delighting people on the kinds of experiences that brands and products and companies could be offering. And a great example, I've been trying to give my bank like a little bit extra money each month for some payments I need to make, and I can't do it. And I like went to the customer service representative and I was like, I want to give you more money. And they're like, we wish we could, but the algorithm caps it at this amount is what you can transfer into us. And I had to like change banks. I was like, you don't want more money? I'll go to a bank that is happy to take more money on a monthly basis. And I think we're going to find that more and more, which is humans are going to be excited to like want to help problem solve, but they're not going to understand why the algorithm made the decision it made.
Mm.
And they're going to be like, I wish I could help. Unfortunately, I can't. This is as far as I can take you. The algorithm will eventually adjust itself to you and perhaps solve that problem for you. Like that's a very real thing that's happening right now because we're thinking about AI as cost cutting. You
Yeah.
may remember the Zappos brand that was built.
Hmm.
They looked at customer service as a brand touch point, as an opportunity to get to know your customer better. I mean, we'll spend millions on advertising, but like here you are on a one-to-one call with a customer and have an opportunity to delight them. And instead we're treating it as a cost. And again, that's the using AI like an electric walkway just to get through something faster instead of thinking about it as a bridge to like connect and bring your customers from a problem they're having to a solution or to delight them with an experience that's tailored to them.
Yeah. I'd have to think more if this is like with every new technology, if there's a wave that starts with the low-hanging fruit and that's what the cost. It's like, how can we optimize versus how can we create new experiences, new opportunities, new markets, new revenue streams, new what have you for these businesses that really make a huge impact. And so I think it's almost like brand and product level thinking versus like operational domains within these businesses, right?
It's said that with every new wave of technology, people overestimate its potential in the short run and underestimate its potential in the long run. I mean, over the last 5 years, we've gone from talking about like cryptocurrency to metaverse to AI alone, right? And so there's always this like hype factor, but the reality is all those things are going to be really powerful and part of our life in the long run, and we just have to kind of see it through. But I think one of the challenges, Jason, that I've encountered, having worked in corporations for a long time, is that companies um, follow linear processes, right? That's why there's things like net present value, right? This is predicated on a linear process. And when you do budget planning, that is a linear. How much do you need this year? How much did you use last year? Let's forecast how much you can spend next year.
Mm.
And then they're like, oh, I'm going to get efficiencies if I can allocate that spend up front. I know what I'm going to spend this year. I've now allocated certain portions to certain classes of marketing, let's say, and media budgets and thresholds for audiences. But then what happens when like something new and unexpected happens in the market? How does that change your business? Like, I was at eBay when Amazon acquired Whole Foods. So should we like think about that as a different moment in our business and business planning, or even in smaller things, like when something really cool happens for your brand, like when, uh, like Beyonce gives a shout out to a brand that suddenly is like overloaded with attention that they hadn't anticipated. Like, can they seize on that if you've planned everything linearly? And so, to be more clear and crisp, I'm a nonlinear thinker in the world of business, which is a linear world. And there's many people like me out there, and that's why certain careers invite that kind of person, like maybe a creative career. There may be nonlinear thinkers in other places, but some things like finance and accounting are really require that sort of linear approach, whereas creativity can come from anywhere, insights can come from anywhere, and action can come from anywhere. And that's why you'll see some themes that I've been touching on, right? Which is like being open, like embracing the like skill sets of the people that are already at your company to capitalize on that, and to really think about how you can use technology to radically transform, not incrementally get a little bit better at something, but like make a big bet at something. And that could, and I've been at businesses that have made those big bets and realized tremendous opportunity. And I've been at businesses that think incrementally and sort of stagnate for years and years to come, or
Hmm.
years and years in their past.
Fascinating. And yeah, I was curious, like what it's been like for you as a nonlinear thinker, right, in these organizations, and how to fuse these ways of thinking together to get to really the best outcome. Because I guess yeah, it can never be one or the other. It kind of has to be both.
I mean, I'll be honest, it's has not been always so easy. Like I've been able to do some really great things because I've been able to bring in really amazing people into an organization and support them. And I've had leaders and people that have supported me and taken those bets on me. But as a whole, it's not easy. And to be honest, like the more you advance in a company, I would say the lonelier it gets. I had a business coach who's amazing, and she has a business literally called "It's Lonely at the Top," right? And so, like the further up sort of the ladder you go, potentially the more isolating it becomes because you don't have as many people around you to like seek the guidance from, and you don't have as many people around you. Like you're now supposed to be orchestrating and guiding and being that resource for others. And that is, I don't think, the right kind of thinking, because it turns out even at the leadership level, those people are there. You just have to be vulnerable enough to ask. And many companies don't want to see vulnerability from their leaders, right? And so then that becomes really isolating. But true leadership, I think, can come from vulnerability and putting yourself out there and bringing people in, and that's what creates collaboration. That's what leads to like people thinking you're empathetic. If you are just sort of like stoic and maybe even a little self-righteous, that results in putting up walls and barriers and fiefdoms. People don't want to work with you. People may not want to follow you. People may not want to believe in you. But when you're vulnerable and you put yourself out there, well, now you're building those bridges, and your people can see you as a human and can see you as a person trying to make change. And maybe they'll agree with you, maybe they won't agree with you, but they'll certainly appreciate that you're being real with them and open. And to me, that's like a cornerstone of what it means to be collaborative, and that's the way of the future. So it doesn't have to be as lonely at the top if you're willing to put yourself out there more, and if you're in an organization that feels safe in which you can do that. Now, with the rise of AI, are people feeling safer or more threatened? Are people feeling supported or more like or having more demands on them or more room to like create and innovate?
more and more you see the best in class examples of these companies that I think we're talking about who leadership is vulnerable, is leads with kind of authenticity, is open, transparent, and kind of that fosters a much better environment for their people, for nonlinear thinkers, for creativity, for breakthrough thinking, but often goes, unfortunately, too much against the sometimes, especially with public companies, the quarterly, business cycle and results that need to be driven and
Well,
just
yeah, but
balancing
then
that, I think. Yeah.
sometimes these public company leaders might get themselves in a little bit of, in hot seats,
Yeah.
and they give these like rote answers that are just sound like robotic because that's like what was scripted for them. And and then people lose confidence in those kinds of leaders. To be honest, there's a lot of research right now about the trust deficits that exist in the world. You can look at Pew research. You can look at like Edelman's Trust Barometer. You can look at a lot of resources right now that like people tend to not really believe companies. They don't believe what they say. And that's so important when you're thinking about your brand and when you're thinking about your messaging. How do you create that level of believability? Now, why is that? Well, maybe it's that their actions aren't connected with what they're saying. Maybe it's because they don't appear as like human and relatable. There's a lot of reasons. Maybe it's because instead of personalization, we've moved to an era of polarization, right? Like a lot of these businesses thrive on people being angry at one another. Like I'm thinking about social media businesses, right? Like engagement levels go through the roof when we're really polarized. That's really good for advertising revenue. If you think of social media as a media, but if you think of social media as a connection, then it's terrible for that. That means like we're using the same medium that could bring people together to actually disrupt and pull them further apart. And we see that play out time and time again. And so part of being vulnerable might also be to take some responsibility for what's happened with, how AI has been used in social media and the problems that are occurring. And this is really real stuff. So like I'm really passionate about it, Jason, because like I don't think people are generally okay. We've sort of glossed over the fact that like there's been COVID, gloss over the fact that like there's social isolation from working from home, or gloss over the fact that like people are, doom scrolling on their phones, or we gloss over the fact that the kind of content that is most engaging is destructive. We gloss over research that talks about like challenges people have with mental health. Um, like major challenge. We're talking about like people at work having challenges in the workplace, and then we're asking those people to do even more with less. And so it's like we're creating these little pressure cookers, and then we want brands to come out and like be funny and engage people, and like there's totally a role for that. I'm all for it. But as long as it's real and you're really supporting your customers and you're really thinking about what they need and how to create a better future together. Um, Otherwise, it's just like zany, whimsical humor that people may disbelieve or not believe because they don't trust, or they're so distracted by all the other touch points in their life, they'll forget who that was from. And so, I wish more brands were more vulnerable. I wish leaders were more vulnerable. I wish organizations were kinder. And kindness doesn't mean nice. It just means like treating people like with respect that they deserve. And when they don't, you get those viral moments where like, a young woman like videotaped herself about to get fired, and like it went viral, and the CEO was shocked at how the layoff was handled. But like, should they really have been shocked? Like they knew it was going to be some like scripted, insensitive uh thing. And so how do they better take accountability and bring that level of empathy to their employees and to their customers? to use AI and other tools to create experiences that people can really crave. And there are companies that do that. They do it great. There's so many interesting brands. We talked about Airbnb earlier. Like you look at like A24. Look at what they're doing. It's really cool stuff. Like they started as an independent film house, and now they're creating the kinds of experiences that people like really crave and are delighted by. And that was not like a little bit of a counter move there. It wasn't like the most obvious kind of content that they started creating. And anyway, let me. It looks like you may have more questions. I'm going to come up for air for you here.
I'm curious then, thinking about all of this, you know, the long kind of experience that you've had in the industry and leading these global brands, the phases of, where, work and culture and brand has evolved to today. How does this translate into what your approach is now?
Yeah, like thanks for asking, Jason. Like, well, I start by making sure that businesses are grounded in what's happening in culture. Like really exposing them to that kind of thinking. So many businesses like to think about their competitors, but competitors are only part of the equation. The other part of the equation is like what's happening in the world today that's relevant, or maybe doesn't seem relevant, but actually is relevant when you just open the aperture a bit more. And so I really like to start by immersing. I do these like workshops and I'll bring people through. Here's what's happening in culture and what it means to you and your brand. Here's what's happening in your category and what it means to you and your brand. And here's what's happening at your company and what it means to you and your brand. And so when you look at like all through the lens of your customer, but when you look at what's happening in culture, what's happening in your category, what's happening at your company, you establish a foundation of truth. I have this one slide, it's a bench, one bench, and it says, "This is a bench." And next to it is another bench, and it says, "This is not a bench." And, maybe any of us who have worked in corporate America might relate to this like sensation where sometimes you're in a meeting and you're like, they're saying that's not a bench, but I know it's a bench. Like, why can't we just call it a bench and just acknowledge what it is? And, that happens all the time in my experience. And so, like, grounding people in the truth of where they are relative to culture, category, and things that are happening at the company is a great foundation from which to build your brand. But if you didn't really start at that point, well, then, you're building a brand on shaky ground because you're sort of pretending that you're something else. I worked for a company. They wanted to be Google, but they did carpeting and chemical bound polymer like work in a lab in South Carolina. And I'm like, you're not Google. Like you, be great at who you are. Let's ground you in your truth and build from there. And so Rick Rubin has a great quote, aiming for greatness is different than aiming to be better than someone else. And so people always think about their competitors, but what if you just be informed by that, but like park it for a minute and now envision where you can get to. And those are the cool, courageous brands that are willing to transform and grow and do something like again, I was part of the historic Adobe transformation where we moved from selling box software to offering cloud-based subscriptions. It doesn't seem so radical now, but back in 2012, that was a major thing. We were the first major brand to go in the software category to shift to a subscription model like that from a box product. And that was a huge transformation that others have since followed. But there weren't really great examples to draw from then. We had to like fly without a net, if you will. And if we got it wrong, it would have been the end of the company. Fortunately, we didn't, and it launched, a lot of great things for years to come.
I think grounding in truth is sometimes, yeah, like you said, it should be the obvious start, but too much. There's too many shiny objects that, distract and pull you away.
It's hard, it's nerve-wracking to call like I was, there, and when meeting with the founders of eBay and in the eBay boardroom. And it's a little daunting to like explain that like we're a challenger brand. It doesn't quite sit right with people that like invented a whole category of, the online commerce and ratings and reviews and transparency. Like there's so many things that are built on the eBay model, but the brand itself became a little less relevant than the model and the things that they developed. But fortunately, eBay was really receptive to that, and we were able to like reposition the brand across the globe for significant growth and really tap into something that was like unique to us, but also important to customers. And so we talked a little bit about that foundation of truth is so important. The other part that's really important, Jason, I think, is bringing tangible human insights to bear, like real human insights that aren't just observations, but they shed new light on how to think about the business or the brand or your marketing or the opportunity ahead. And then having a really strong point of view as a brand. These things all factor in. Um, I know we've been chatting a while. I wanted to, mention just one other thing, which was like for people starting out in the career of branding or even that are seasoned professionals, like how do you get better at it? Now, a lot of people are going to tell you like just, chat GPT or any LLM out there is like the greatest gift to any individual because now you can sound brilliant or funny or weird or whatever it is you want to do or unleash your creativity. Personally, those are fine companions to have with you on your journey. But to me, like my three things would be like get outside, get curious, and get connected. Like you're not gonna like create the next amazing thing by just staring at the screen. Like you need to get away sometimes and go for a long walk or play guitar or go to a restaurant or go to a meetup or go like meet people and have real human take public transportation. Like do go for a long walk in the city, whatever it is, but like get out, get away from your screen for a little while and let your mind wander a bit and dream up those scenarios. So that then when you work with your chat GPT buddy, you can actually have something interesting to tell it versus just relying on it to tell you what to do. And then the other is get curious. Like, how do you get an insight in something? The insight comes from continuously asking the question, why? Be like, I had that observation. I saw that thing and that struck me. Well, why? What was it? And like, the more you keep asking why, the deeper into the insight you'll get. And you might put a little bit of yourself in there. You might be like, I'm vulnerable. It's a little vulnerable. Like when the insight gets so deep and raw that like you're taking a risk and you're a little vulnerable to like say it out loud, but then you do and other people are like, oh yeah, I feel that same way or I know what you mean. That can be game changing for organizations, for brands, and for the people. And then lastly, like get connected. Like it doesn't have to be lonely at the top or lonely at the bottom. Like, have conversations with people in real life or by phone, but there's a lot of social isolation going on out there, and we're at risk of having AI be a better friend to you than actual people. And let's those are the kinds of things because in the end, Jason, brands are built by people. We might use the tools of technology and we might really rely on them now more than ever, but like it's people that are hiring the brand leaders. It's people that are making the decisions in the end. It's people that will stop great work or fuel great work um, based on all sorts of reasons. But like if we don't know how to sell in ideas, if we don't know how to like be there for people to rely on, if we don't know how to like be a shoulder for someone to cry on or be a like a fan to fuel someone's like trajectory in their career, like those are the things that'll make a big difference. And those are the things that help brands accelerate. Like my ability to call up people and be like, from 25 years of being connected to them, and be like, let's go do this thing. Like when I hacked the Adobe logo, which is something that came at great professional risk, I invited artists to come in and tinker and experiment with the logo after being told not to touch it. Uh, I was able to do it because I was able to call people that trusted me and create a safe space. And so that comes from being connected and investing in those connections. So just wanted to leave you with those thoughts as well.
That was incredible. Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to wrap this one up, and I appreciate could go on for a lot longer. There's a lot in there that I would love to talk more about. Unfortunately, I think we could always pop down the street and continue the conversation. But for this
Let's do it.
session,
Let's do all
um,
the three things. Let's get outside, let's get
let's
curious, and let's get connected
let's
together.
get connected. Um, Absolutely. Well, Carl, thank you so much for the time and for
Yeah.
sharing your experience, knowledge, the wisdom that you've gained over the years. Definitely going to do a lot of thinking on this myself, and yeah, looking forward to sharing this with our community and network. And yeah, seeing you also at the next Brandon Sand, and hope
Yeah.
anybody else
And
here who's listening in LA checks it out.
yeah,
Um,
brandonsand.com. You're also welcome to go to hiitsus.com and learn a little bit more about my background and work. And if I can be a resource to you or just listen, happy to do so.
Amazing. Well, thank you again, Carl,
Thank
and
you, Jason. Great to see you.
likewise. Have a good rest of the day.
Peace.